Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 141 with Dee Kei Waddell. I had a great chat with Dee Kei and we talked about so many things, including getting started opening a commercial studio space really young, getting a serious confidence boost from Leslie Brathwaite at Mix with the Masters. We talk about podcasting, his approach to mixing, including starting with the bass, being aware of when he's losing objectivity and how he refocuses, his thoughts on analog sound, monitoring, mastering, the biggest lesson from Wolfpack, fatherhood, Twitch, and just to have fun doing it. So tons of takeaways here. I really love this conversation. I think you will too. So with all that to say, here's my conversation with Dee Kei Waddell coming up right here on Secret Sonics. Hey everyone. If you're anything like me, you often find yourself looking for business insight in podcasts. And I'm sure many of you are also into meditation and reflection to help better understand yourself. Former guest of the show, Carl Bonner, decided to launch a podcast that brings these two elements together. It's a series of guided self-reflection exercises, but specifically for freelance creatives like you and me, focusing on the struggles we face as we try to grow our businesses, while also finding more happiness in the work that we do. It's called Thanks for Thinking. It's definitely an unusual format, but if you want to grow your self-awareness, find deeper career satisfaction, and make more money, then I think this podcast might be for you. Experience it for yourself and click the link in the show notes below. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I am your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Dee Kei Waddell. Dee Kei is a mixing engineer and the host of the Mixing Music podcast. Brian Hood actually got me hip to his wonderful podcast, Brian Hood of the Six Figure Creative, that is. So I reached out to see if he'd be interested to join me on my podcast, and he was. And so he's graciously agreed to join us today on the air. So with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Dee Kei.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. It's not very often that I'm the one that's getting interviewed.
Yeah, right. Like, what's it like to have the tables be flipped, you know?
It's wonderful. It's kind of cathartic, relaxing, to say the least. Stress-free.
Yeah. Stress-free, right? You don't have to think about what you're going to ask, and you could just blurt it all out.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about your story. Like, I really don't know much about you, but I really like your podcast. I listened to a few episodes. You're giving away the farm, so to speak, which is great, and telling people what to do, like, how to mix, which is awesome. So, but I'd love to hear, take us back a little bit. How did music get started for you? How did that kind of evolve into production? I know you mostly do mixing now. I'd love to hear about that journey.
Yeah, of course. So let me start off kind of influences as well. So I'm originally from Okinawa, Japan. I was born there. I lived there till I was about 5. Japanese is my first native language. And I moved to Chicago for elementary school and middle school, where I was for 10 years. That's kind of when I learned to cuddle up next to the radio, and 96.3, Julian on the radio. He was another Asian dude that was like DJing the radio, and I'd wait for his sets. And that's kind of like when I fell in love. And it was during the mid 2000s kind of a deal. So late 2000s. So we're talking like I grew up, and my core foundation from those days, Neo, Chris Brown, Rihanna, some old Kanye, and of course it's Chicago. So like no rock. And quite frankly, my Japanese mother, my father's really young. So like my dad had me when he was 22 or something like that. He grew up on like 80s, 90s, like pop hip hop, not Tupac, but more like Tone Loc, Eminem type stuff, more like pop hip hop. And my mom, we grew up on like what now Americans call city pop, like Japanese 80s pop, where very much Quincy Jones, Michael Jackson influence with strings and horns, the whole thing. So like lots of jazz and funk influence stuff, obviously Motown, Earth, Wind and Fire type stuff as well.
The best.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was this weird combination of like pop R&B, pop hip hop from the radio.
Soul funk.
Yeah, and a lot of soul funk and a lot of Japanese music. In Japan, they love reggae, actually. Reggae is a very popular genre in Japan. So like I grew up listening to much more reggae than you would ever think that any American would.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I've actually been to Japan, and people are hardcore into the music there.
Yeah, they're the best fans ever. If you can get Japanese fan base, they're the best fans.
Yeah, get a tour to Japan. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So yeah, and then that went into like high school. I joined a band. Again, I have no rock experience at this point. Like the first time I ever got introduced to Aerosmith was Guitar Hero. Like, this is how little rock. Like, my mom was, I hate to say it out loud like this, but like, my mom was straight up racist against American 80s music. She's like, it sounds like you're wearing overalls and they go to plumbing for like, like, and it was like this really weird for her. I don't know. It was just really weird. And for me, I discovered the first time ever was in high school. I joined this band. We were kind of doing like not metal, not punk, but some sort of like alternative rock thing. They're like, DK, you sing in choir. Do you want to like play bass for us? It's simple enough. And I was like, okay, I'm bored enough. We're in high school. So I did. That's when I started recording because of this band. And in high school, then I discovered Vampire Weekend, which was, if you're familiar with Vampire Weekend, I'm like,
Sure.
I didn't know rock could be like not metal. Like that's how ignorant of rock music that I was. Like I didn't realize you could play electric guitars and have like clean tones. Like I didn't realize that was a thing. And then So then I got really deep into music production, started kind of like low-key mixing with like templates and GarageBand and Cubase that came free with the interfaces. And yeah, that's kind of how to start the career. And then I did a 2-year church missionary service in Japan. And it was during that time when I decided that I wanted to do music full-time. The epiphany that I had, which is just quite crazy, quite the opposite of what everybody else would have, is I actually want to be a therapist. I've had many mental health and emotional struggles throughout my high school career, and music was always there for me, very therapeutic, of course, for many people, right? It was during that time when I thought, I'd love to be a therapist, but would I be willing to be a human garbage can for free? And I thought to myself, and honestly speaking, I don't think I would. I don't think I'd be willing to listen to people's problems and help them out for free. But you know what I would be willing to do for free is music. And I know most people would be thinking, it would be selfish to pursue your own dreams and make your family poor. And you know what I'm saying? Like it's selfless to do a job that you don't like in order to provide better for your family, right? I had the opposite experience. I thought it was selfish to do anything for money. And so I couldn't fathom the idea of doing anything for the sake of anything like for money. Like, cause I don't care if I'm poor for the rest of my life, but I'd be willing to help people for free with music. And so it kind of came to that decision. It's very like opposite of what most normal people think. Granted, the whole basis of this entire conversation should be that I'm crazy, and that's like the bottom line here. I
think everybody that does what we do is a little bit crazy, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's in the blood.
So yeah, after that, started college in Utah, and that's when I took out a loan and started to my first commercial facility with absolutely no experience at 22. No, like commercial experience. Didn't do an internship, didn't train under anybody, and just kind of like bootstrap my experience. And then most people would succeed, but I was crazy enough and committed enough, and a lot of full-time school while running the studio 80 to 100 hours a week, getting like 2 to 3 hours of sleep. I was married at this time. Like I got married when I was really young as well, 21. So like it was a lot of grinding and making a shit ton of mistakes and just trying my best to survive, and it turned into something very beautiful, and I matured and learned in a way that people liked somehow, and I found out that I'm actually much more of an entrepreneur first before I'm a producer. So I started like 6 other companies after I started the studio, 4 of which like got shelved, 2 of which are still running today. One of them is now currently valued at 8. We just got revaluation, or we're about to get a revaluation. We're hoping that we'll hit 8 figures actually. We have about 15 employees. Hold on, I want to be very clear for anybody listening right now. I want to be very clear for listening right now. I'm still poor as shit. Owning a company means like nothing. As far as like liquid cash, sure, I'm worth a lot, but I guarantee anybody listening right now is probably making more money than me. So like I just, that doesn't mean I'm wealthy in any
You're
sense
playing the
of
long
word.
game. You're playing the long game.
It's definitely a long game.
That's the smart game.
Yeah, there you go. And then it's a media marketing company. It's called LaunchPod Media, which the episode with Brian Hood was about this marketing. It's a podcast marketing company. Hence why I was one of the 3 founders of the company. And I was the only one that hadn't started a podcast. And so I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to start a podcast. Let me start it as experimentation. And then we use some of the marketing tools. Because, I mean, obviously I had some help. We were ranked like #1 new music podcast in 2019 in like 3 in music, in technology, and in hobbies for a couple weeks. And we're doing really, really well with almost 500,000 downloads. And it's quite, this is honestly just a passion project. And it's so funny to me how little time and effort I put into it. But people love it.
Teach me your ways, man. I put so much time into this.
Yeah, for real. And so to kind of wrap it up, I apologize for taking so long, but to wrap it up,
no. That's great.
From all the recording and producing that I did in Utah with my studio called Cold House, I went to Mix with the Masters in 2019 to go hang out with Leslie Brathwaite. And
legend.
Who's now a close friend and mentor of mine. And he did something that changed my life. We talk about it a little bit later. But he basically instilled in me the confidence to really pursue mixing more confidently, and more passionately. So I was feeling really insecure at that time. He just turned that around, changed my life forever. Like I will never be able to fully repay that guy. Wow. That's when I came home from that. I started doing mixing only because I noticed that most of my income was from mixing specifically already, because I was always promoting, hey, like I'm all for the artist. So I always like, yo, record at home and just send it to me for mixing. It'll save you money and it will sound pretty good. Better than you mixing on your own and only paying me for the recording, at least. That was my thought process. So that's kind of how I got into mixing, made more dollars per hour. So it was like kind of a no-brainer. Did so well that I no longer am actively working for LaunchPod, and I moved to LA to start another commercial studio out here. It's called In the Mix Studios in North Hollywood. We have 2 rooms right now, and it's doing really well.
Let's go back to Leslie Brathwaite. Like that's so awesome. Like I just want to hear a bit more about that. That sounds like a life-changing moment. If you're willing to share a bit more about that.
Absolutely. So I'm sure anybody listening right now is familiar with Mix with the Masters. They have one-day seminars. Sure. They have week-long seminars. They have online videos, of course. I went to France. I was selected by Leslie himself. You have to apply, and then after being accepted, you pay money. But I was at school at the time, so the school paid for all of it as like a scholarship thing, counting it as an internship credit. It was awesome. And went to France and hung out with Leslie for a week. There's only about like 12 of us. There was me, a couple other people, and we were like the youngest group to ever go to this seminar. There was like even a high school kid there. It was crazy. I don't think that they've ever, it's not common for them to accept college-age students, let alone high school-age students in their program. And when I asked if I could pay with scholarship money, they're like, I don't know. We've never been asked to do that. So which is kind of crazy. So the pressure was on. I was this nobody kid from Utah that never was mentored, that was never interning, that just started his own business. I was more of a businessman than I was an engineer. Extremely felt out of place, very insecure. These people in the group had like platinum records and gold records all across the world, not just America, but in Europe as well. And there was a point, and this is a life-changing part here. First off, I found out that he's super all about not overthinking, totally in the box, doesn't overcomplicate anything, super simple process, to the point where like the owners of Mix with the Masters were like low-key disappointed because he basically because he's like, I didn't realize, like, I don't know if this is disrespectful to the craft because he just made it seem so simple.
He's not pulling out all the crazy compressors and stuff they have there, right?
Absolutely. And like the dude's amazing. Like he's a God-fearing man and loving man. Sorry, that's a better way of saying it. I don't like fearing. God-loving man. Like he cares for his family. He does like Cardi B and Pharrell and all these big hip hop acts, but he still doesn't allow his children to like listen to his sessions where they're cursing a lot, which is like funny for me. I don't know. He's just overall just a genuinely good person. Anyway, we get to the point where we're showing him our mixes for feedback. And out of the 12 people, he had really good feedback for everybody. There was 2 people in the audience that are participating that he didn't have any feedback for. He listened to the whole song and he approved it. He's like, this sounds great. I wouldn't accept money for this. I would send it to a master engineer. That's all I would do. One guy, funny story on its own, mixed it all on headphones. And the second guy was me. And it was to the point I was so insecure And I was so unhappy with or unsure of where I was and how I stood in the world that when he first said he didn't have any feedback, my initial reaction was anger. I looked at him and I thought to myself, I was like, you have so much pity for me that you won't even give me feedback. You know?
Yeah.
And I looked around the
Imposter
room,
syndrome was strong.
extremely in that moment. And
Yeah.
I looked around the room and everybody else is kind of wide-eyed and accepted